Hey everybody, once again, this is Scott Ryan Paulson, the Rooster of Tucson, here to wake you up. And once again, I want to say welcome back to the Citizen Soldier Podcast, reporting live here from Hack Studios here in Tucson, Arizona, aka Cartel Hell. That's right, and today I want to introduce something that I hope becomes much bigger than a segment on this podcast. I want it to become a mindset, and I want it to become something people carry with them every single day when they leave their homes. It's called the Iron Voice Society. When you hear that name, I don't want you thinking about an organization with membership cards or monthly meetings. I want you thinking about ordinary people who refuse to sit back and watch their communities crumble. And I want you thinking about neighbors who know each other by name, parents who teach their children responsibility, veterans who continue serving after taking off the uniform, and everyday Americans who understand that freedom comes with responsibility. And one of the biggest problems I see today, people, is that we become spectators. We become so comfortable watching the world through our phones that we've stopped paying attention to what's happening right outside our own front door. And we know what's trending on social media, but we don't know the names of the people who live across the street. And we can tell you every headline from across the country, but we couldn't tell you what's happening out in city council meetings right now. That's backwards, people. And real change doesn't begin in Washington. It begins on your own street. It begins with choices you make every single day. Whether you're willing to become someone your family, your friends, and your neighbors can count on. I've always believed that leadership has nothing to do with titles. You don't become a leader because somebody hands you a badge or puts you behind the podium. No. You become a leader because people learn that they can trust your word. They know if you tell them you're going to show up, you're going to show up. They know if someone needs help, you're going to be there. And they know that your character doesn't change depending on who's watching you. And that's the kind of people I want the Iron Voice Society to be made of. Not people looking for attention or internet fame. People looking to make a difference. That's what we're talking about. Think about the greatest people you've ever known. Chances are they weren't famous. They probably never appeared on television. And they probably never had thousands of followers online. But they made an impact because they lived with integrity. They worked hard. They took care of their families. They helped people without expecting applause. And those are the people who quietly build strong communities. And we need more of them today than ever before. And preparedness is another word you're going to hear me talk about a lot on this show. And I don't mean living in fear, like I've always said. I mean living with confidence. And that is a big difference. A prepared person doesn't panic because we've taken the time to think ahead. We know where the first aid kit's at. We have emergency supplies, flashlights, fresh batteries ready to go. And we have important phone numbers written down. And people out there, they know how to react when something unexpected happens. So instead of freezing in the moment, no, that's not paranoia. That's responsibility, people. And the same goes for your physical health. Do some push-ups. If you've been following my own fitness journey out there, I've made a commitment to becoming stronger, healthier, and more disciplined than I've ever been. And that isn't just about looking better, it's about being capable of doing so. And I want to know that if my family ever needs me, I'm physically able to help. And that's a responsibility I take serious. Strength isn't just measured in the weight of what you lift. It's measured in your willingness to keep going. When life kicks you down, you step back up. It's measured in your discipline, when nobody's cheering for you. It's measured by the promises you keep to yourself. And that's where confidence comes from. Not from talking about what you're going to do tomorrow. Nah, it's from what you're doing today. And the Iron Voice Society isn't asking people to become superheroes. It's asking people to become dependable. Imagine what our communities would look like if every person listening to this podcast decided to become just 5% more prepared, 5% more patient, and 5% more disciplined, and 5% more willing to help someone else. That might not sound like much, people, but multiply that by hundreds, then thousands, then tens of thousands of people. And then suddenly you've created something powerful. And moments don't begin because one person has all the answers. They begin because ordinary people decide they're tired of waiting for someone else to fix everything. And that's exactly what I want this segment to become. Not a place where we complain endlessly, a place where we challenge one another to become better fathers, better mothers, neighbors, citizens, leaders, because when we improve ourselves, we improve our communities. That's where change begins, my friends. Not with slogans, not with politics, that's for damn sure. With people. Ordinary people making extraordinary decisions every single day. And that's exactly what I hope every one of you listening decides to become. A citizen who pays attention, who prepares, who serves, who leads by example. That, my friend, is the Iron Voice Society. Speak the truth and fear no one. And one of these things that keeps me motivated to sit down behind this microphone week after week is the simple belief that people still care. I believe there are far more good people than bad in this country. And the problem is that the good people often stay quiet while the loudest voices dominate the conversation. And the Iron Voice Society is about changing all that. It's about encouraging good people to stop doubting themselves and start realizing how much influence you really have. You don't have to be wealthy. You don't have to have millions of dollars and backing to make a difference. You don't have to be famous. You don't need a title before your name or 1 million followers online. Every person listening to this right now has a circle of influence. And maybe it's your family, maybe it's your coworkers, it's the people who live on your street, the kids who look up to you. That right there is where change begins. And I think we've underestimated the power of setting an example, my friends. We spend way too much time waiting for someone else to inspire us, that we forget somebody might already be looking at us for inspiration. Your children, they're watching you how you handle adversity. Your friends are watching whether you keep your word. And those moments matter far more than any speech you'll ever give. And that's why I keep coming back to the idea of discipline. Discipline isn't exciting. It isn't glamorous. It's hard work. Nobody applauds for you waking up early to work on yourself or staying committed when nobody else is paying attention. But discipline compounds over time, my friends. Every good decision builds on the last one. And every promise you keep to yourself strengthens your confidence. And eventually, people start noting that consistency, and that's when trust begins to grow. And I also want to encourage every one of you to become a student again. Learn something new every week. Read a book that challenges your thinking. Study your local community. Attend those public meetings once in a while. Listen more than you speak. And ask questions when you don't understand something. There is nothing weak about admitting you don't know everything. In fact, some of the strongest people I've ever met were the first to say, hey, teach me something. I don't know this. And the Iron Voice Society, it's not built on ego. It's built on humility, responsibility, and service. And if you can combine those three things right there, people, with discipline, you'll become the kind of person that people naturally respect. Not because you demanded it, but because you've earned it through your actions. And I also believe preparedness is one of the greatest forms of confidence that you can develop. Trust me. Preparedness isn't about expecting the worst every day. It's about refusing to be caught completely off guard when life throws you those curveballs. Build your first aid kit, keep emergency supplies at home, learn CPR, and have family backup plans, as we discussed last week. So, know where those important documents are and make sure that the people you love know how to reach each other in those unexpected times. So, and those aren't extreme ideas, people. You have to make that a habit. The same goes for your neighborhood. Get to know the people who live around you. If someone is elderly, check in on them, especially during the crazy monsoon season here. If a family down the street is struggling, see if there's a way to help. If you notice something that genuinely concerns you, in a place where you're, allowed to go and observe and document, do so. Do it responsibly and accurately. And let me tell you something. There's a difference between paying attention and jumping to conclusions. And I want the Iron Voice Society to always choose facts over rumors and integrity over outrage any day. And when we talk about speaking the truth and fearing no one, I'm talking about having the courage to stand by your principles while treating other people with respect. It's easy to shout, trust me. It's much harder to have a thoughtful conversation nowadays. It's easy to criticize. It's much harder to become part of the solution. And that's the standard I want us to hold ourselves to. So here's my challenge before our next Iron Voice Society episode. Pick one area of your life and improve it this week. Maybe it's your health, maybe it's your diet, maybe it's your preparedness, maybe reconnecting with your family, maybe it's finally introducing yourself to the neighbor that you've only waved at for years, and never talked to. Progress, it doesn't happen all at once, people. It happens one decision at a time. And every positive decision moves you closer to becoming the kind of citizen your community needs. And remember, my friends, the strongest movements in history didn't begin with perfect people. They began with ordinary people who decided they were no longer willing to stand on the sidelines. And I believe every one of us has that same opportunity today. And the question is whether we're willing to accept the responsibility that comes with it. And that's what the Iron Voice Society means to me. It's not just a name. It's a commitment to becoming stronger, wiser, more prepared, and more engaged. It's about living in a way that leaves your family proud, your neighbors encouraged, and your community stronger than you found it. So speak the truth and fear no one, and lead by example, my friends. Once again, this is Scott Ryan Paulson, the Rooster of Tucson, here to wake you up. Once again, stay informed, stay prepared, and stay vigilant, because freedom isn't maintained by spectators, my friend. It's protected by citizens who pay attention. Until next time, keep your eyes open and keep asking questions. And never stop standing for what's right. From Hack Studios, over and out.